Welcome to the Healthy Middle Ground podcast with me, Jen Curtis. So in this episode, I want to talk to you about how to stick to your diet, right? Because if you've been following me for any length of time, you'll know that there is really only one thing that you need in order to lose body fat, and that is a calorie deficit. Whatever your energy expenditure is each day, if you eat fewer calories than that, if you eat less food than that, you'll lose weight. If you eat more food than that, you'll gain weight. And if you eat that number of calories, you'll maintain your weight. So if on average you burn 2,000 calories a day, if you eat fewer calories than that, even 1,900, right, you'll lose weight. You're in a calorie deficit. If you eat more calories than that, you'll gain fat. And if you eat that number of calories, you'll just stay the same. So most of you know this by now, and I've done entire podcast episodes on this topic and on how to lose body fat. But if you're human, you probably know by now that being in a calorie deficit isn't that easy, right? You get hungry, there's lots of temptation, there's, lots of other things going on. You get a lot of decision fatigue. It's hard to know what to eat and things like that. And it's really, really hard to stick to. People really struggle to stick to a diet. And one of the main things that people tell me is that they struggle with consistency, with doing these things long enough. And that brings me to the second thing that you need in order to lose weight is adherence, right? So the first thing is a calorie deficit. And the second thing that you need to lose any amount of body fat is adherence. You have to stick to the diet for a long period of time of weeks and sometimes months in order to get the results that you're looking for. So a really classic example is in a pound of body fat, right? And you see those posts of people waving around a pound of body fat. I also have one of those, even though I haven't used it on social media yet, which I really need to do. In 1 pound of body fat or in half a kilo of body fat, there are 3,500 calories. So if you want to lose 1 pound of body fat, you need to get in a deficit of 3,500 calories. Now, this isn't possible to do in one single day because if your maintenance calories are 2,000, right, you can't just get yourself into a minus deficit of another 1,500. That would mean not eating anything and burning another 1,500 calories on top of the normal things. You can't lose that much fat in one day, besides the fact that you would lose a ton of muscle and it would be really unhealthy and stuff like that, right? But what you can do is you can create a deficit of 3,500 calories over the course of a week. So again, going back to our example of you need 2,000 calories a day to maintain your body weight, over the course of a whole week, that means 7 times 2,000 is 14,000. You need 14,000 calories in 1 week to maintain your weight. So in order to lose 1 pound or half a kilo, you would have to be at a deficit over the course of the whole week of 3,500 calories. And that conveniently works out as 500 calories a day. And that would mean eating 10,500 calories, if my maths is right, over the course of the whole week. But obviously, most of you want to lose more than 1 pound. So in order to actually lose, 10 pounds or 20 pounds or 30 pounds or 40 pounds, you have to be in a calorie deficit for a very long period of time to get rid of all the body fat that you want to get rid of. And also, if you're very small or if you're leaner or, just a normal person, it is actually quite hard to create a 3,500 calorie deficit every single week, right? There are weeks where you don't create that much of a deficit. You might only create a 2,000 calorie deficit. You might have a lot of events on. You might not create a deficit at all. So this can become a really long thing when you can only lose half a pound a week and things like that. So basically, you have to be in a calorie deficit for a long enough period of time to lose the 10, 20, 30 pounds. And in order to do that, you need to be able to stick to your diet, to adhere to your diet. The word in the industry is adherence. And this is often the hard bit. This is where people trip up. And what I have is I have a kind of 9-step approach, we could call it that, to increasing adherence on a diet. So what I do with my clients on my online coaching program is I absolutely give them calorie targets, right? And I explain to them what their maintenance calories are, what sort of deficit we're aiming for, whether we're aiming for a 20% deficit, 10% deficit, 30% deficit, like whatever it is. And that's basic information that they need to know in order to then be on the diet. But that's not the be all and end all of it, right? Because there's tons of things that then will make it easier and harder to stick to the diet. So I have like 9 things that I work with my clients on in my online program, both one-on-one, and from them I have sort of a big resource library called my academy, the Jen Curtis Academy, JCA, that has lots and lots of video resources and exercises that are aimed towards basically these 9 different things that will actually help you stick to your diet and make the diet less painful and just make it easier to do. So what I thought I'd do in this podcast is I thought I'd take you through those 9 different things and just give you a quick overview of each one. So the 9 different things are: number 1, managing hunger, like managing physiological hunger, right? You can't be hungry. Number 2 is nutrition, getting what you need from the diet. Number 3 is addressing emotional and non-hunger eating. Number 4 is addressing your mindset. So there's a lot of mindset things that get in the way and things that we can work on to get your mindset in a place where you can address fat loss better. Number 5 is addressing mood. Number 6 is addressing habits. Number 7 is hunger and fullness cues and other measures of sort of biofeedback. Number 8 is other boring lifestyle factors. And number 9 is resistance training. Also, this list is pretty much in order from first to last, of the most important to the least important. And you can definitely quibble on which ones are more important, which ones are less important. I definitely have some ones that I would maybe want to move around here, but pretty much this is in order from most important to least important. Okay, so number 1 is about managing hunger. You simply cannot endure hunger for long. So what most people think dieting is just being fucking hungry, going on poverty calories, eating as little as possible, and then just trying to endure that. But you simply just cannot endure hunger for any length of time. And there's all kinds of like psychological and physiological mechanisms, but your body will basically fight back and your mind will fight back. And you will normally just end up in a binge, eating all the things that you said you shouldn't eat, and just eating all the wrong things and way too much. This is what normally happens when people's fat loss strategy is to just eat as little as possible, or when they go on ridiculously low calories that are a really, really, really big deficit. So you have to actually manage hunger and try to reduce hunger in as many ways as possible. And there are a number of things that help to reduce and regulate hunger. Number 1 is eating at regular meal times. I don't overcomplicate this. I try and make it as simple as possible. Breakfast, lunch, afternoon snack, and dinner. I'll be doing other podcast episodes on this. Keeping your meal times very regular and letting your body get used to certain meal times, rather than just going into your day being like, right, I'll just eat when I'm hungry, and then just trying to figure it out as you go along, having a totally blank slate in your day. It doesn't really work. People usually end up then getting hungry, and then that's the worst time to be thinking like, what should I eat? Because that's when you're going to eat the wrong things, when you're actually physiologically hungry. So you can have a simple plan and stick to simple meal times by planning at a time when you're not hungry. Number 2 is making sure that you eat protein and fiber at each meal. Great way of getting lots and lots. They're much more filling than other types of food, but for most people, having some carbs at each meal is going to be important for fullness as well. And just chilling out on the fats. Like, yeah, fats are important, but fats are also extremely calorie dense. Things like getting enough sleep, just really boring stuff like that, helps to regulate hunger. Exercise in the right amounts. This is really important. If you've ever gone and like done a crazy workout and completely fucked yourself up, you end up being really fucking hungry afterwards. But if you go and do the right amount for your level and just increase gradually over time, then exercise and movement actually helps to reduce your hunger and regulate hunger. Another important one is, keeping busy and having distractions and not just thinking about food all the time. But possibly the most important concept that I try to get across to my clients is to focus on filling foods. So we can't register calories eaten. Instead, our bodies register things like volume and weight of food eaten. Therefore, it's important to prioritize filling foods over calorie dense foods. Okay, so a classic mistake a lot of women make is that they wait until they get hungry and then they'll eat something like a couple of dates and a handful of nuts, and it's like 300 calories and it doesn't make them feel full at all, and an hour later they're starving hungry again. Whereas if you had spent those 300 calories on yogurt and bread and fruit, you'll be much fuller for much longer, okay? So it's about prioritizing filling foods rather than calorie dense foods. Even if those calorie dense foods are also very nutritious, they tend to zap a lot of calories without making you full at all. This is one of the most important concepts to understand if you want to lose weight. So one of the things you have to start thinking about is how many calories per 100 grams does this food have? And that is the calorie density of the food. So as an example, chocolate or peanut butter is like 600 calories per 100 grams, whereas potatoes are like 77 calories per 100 grams. So they're much more filling per 100 calories. 100 calories of potatoes is going to be way more filling than 100 calories of chocolate because it's going to have more volume. It's also got more fiber in it. This is possibly the most important concept to understand if you want to lose weight. And I actually have an entire resource for you on this. I'll link it below. I have an entire resource on filling foods and how to prioritize more filling foods in your diet. So I'll link that in the description below. Okay, the second most important thing is nutrition and getting the nutrients that you need from food. Okay, so I'm going to give you the most simple nutrition lecture you've ever heard in your life. You need 6 nutrients from your food. You need protein, fat, vitamins, minerals, fiber, water. That's 6 different things that you need from your food, from your diet. I'm smuggling a lot in there because obviously there's different types of protein, there's different types of fats, different types of minerals and vitamins and stuff like that. But that's basically what you need to get from your diet in order to feel good and to be healthy. Yes, you can technically lose weight without eating a nutritious diet. But it's very, very hard. 1, because you'll feel like shit. And 2, in the long run, you'll be very, very unhealthy. You'll probably get sick all the time. You'll have lots of nutrient deficiencies. When you eat a more healthy diet with more whole foods, it also comes along with eating more filling foods and more voluminous foods. This is a really important one for your long-term health, even though it's not actually as important as, place number 2 might suggest for your diet, for you like actually losing body fat. But it is really important. So that probably means that you really like the taste of fun foods. This is where flexible dieting comes into the fore. You don't need to get 100% of your diet from clean foods or from nutrient dense foods. Okay? But if you get 80% of your diet from nutrient dense foods, you will be healthy. You'll get all the nutrients that you need to be healthy and to feel good. And you'll also probably feel pretty full as well. However, that means that you've got 20% left over that you can get from fun foods, right? You can have a bit of cake, you can have a bit of pizza, you can have a bit of chocolate, ice cream, whatever takes your fancy. Even though these foods are nutrient poor and usually very calorie dense, it doesn't matter, right? Because you can still get with 80% of your diet, Pareto's law, right? 80-20 rule applying to nutrition. If you get 80% of your diet from nutritious foods, it's just as good as 100% of your diet. But that 20% doesn't really matter, okay? You can have 20% coming from more fun foods. The reason why this is important is because it increases your adherence to the diet. If you just cut everything out and eat clean, it's only going to be a matter of time again before you have a brownie. And then you're in this all or nothing thinking space when it comes to diet. You're like, oh, now I've fucked my diet. Now I might as well go back to eating everything. Having a sort of clean approach to dieting is kind of dangerous because you set yourself up for all or nothing thinking. Whereas if you are being very mindful about, okay, 20% of my diet or maybe less is going to come from fun foods, you get out of that all or nothing space, and it makes it much easier mentally to stick to a diet when you know that you can still have the fun foods that you really enjoy and you don't need to be perfect all the time. Okay. Anyway, moving on, because I want to keep this podcast as short and sharp as possible. Number 3 is addressing emotional and non-hunger eating. You can't be hungry on a diet, but I find that most people don't actually gain weight or find weight loss hard because of physiological hunger, right? Most women who start my program and go on a moderate calorie deficit, they don't actually struggle with hunger. Some do, and we have to deal with that, but most don't struggle with hunger. Most people gain weight and find it hard to lose weight because of a whole bunch of what I call non-hunger eating reasons. So there's 2 reasons why you eat food: physiological hunger or non-hunger reasons. Non-hunger reasons include things like boredom, stress, negative emotions, reward, loneliness, habit, tiredness. There's a whole long list. And in my online academy, I go through all of these things in loads of detail. We really dig up what your non-hunger eating patterns are and how to get over them. But the important thing to take away is that until you address this component, no diet will ever work. If food is your only coping strategy for stress, then diets just won't work, because no matter how you decide to limit your calories, if you always turn back to food whenever you're stressed or unhappy or sad or whatever, if that is your coping mechanism and your only coping mechanism, you are going to struggle dieting. Because what most people try to do is they try to take that coping mechanism away. They say, right, I'm not going to eat anymore in the evening, I'm not going to binge. But then eventually they get really stressed, and then they binge again, and then they go back to their previous eating habits because they don't have anything to replace it with. So a big part of what I do on my online coaching program is helping people identify their non-hunger eating, understanding what triggers cause them to eat. And then we have a kind of, I have a 2-pronged approach to dealing with stress. One thing is like a stress focused solution. So focusing on reducing stress in other ways. So having other coping mechanisms, like exercise is a great one because it kills 2 birds with 1 stone. Going out for a walk, talking to a friend, meditation, gardening, painting. Like there's lots of things you can do to reduce stress in your life, and you have to have other ways of reducing stress. Maybe journaling. There's an entire journaling module on my coaching program. So all of these things can help you reduce stress. But the other side of that is actually dealing with your problems, because no amount, if your car's broken down or if you hate your job, no amount of stress relief is going to get rid of that problem and fix your car. You actually have to go out and fix your problems. But one part of that most people really struggle with is having other coping mechanisms and other ways of dealing with their problems and with their stress in their life, because ultimately eating fun food is really great in the short term. It feels really good in the moment, but it has some really devastating consequences downstream in the medium to long term. And you end up with 2 problems to fix instead of 1. So yeah, again, a lot of what we do on the program is figuring out other ways of coping and managing stress. So number 4 is mindset. So addressing your mindset around diet, exercise, your body. So most people give up on diets, not because they're hungry or not because they don't know what to do or not because they don't know what to eat or anything else. They give up because they have really fucked up ways of thinking around diet and all of that stuff. So they have a lot of all or nothing thinking is one of the most common ones, catastrophizing, regret orientation, like, oh, I should have lost the weight by now, I should have done this last year, and shoulds, like shoulding all over themselves. So most people give up because of these mindset things. You know, they get on the scale, they see they've gone up a pound and they're like, oh, that's it, I've ruined the whole diet. Or they have a brownie and they're like, oh no, now I've ruined my whole diet, I might as well just give up. This kind of all or nothing thinking gets people in a lot of trouble and causes them to give up. So again, on my online coaching academy, there are tons of tools like CBT. I work really closely with my one-on-one coaching clients on like CBT, journaling exercises. And there's an entire module on mindset. There's an entire module on journaling, and there's an entire psychology module. So this is a really big part. I actually often say to people, like, there's 3 parts to the program, really: nutrition, training, and like the psychology mindset side of things. And often this is like the biggest thing that gets in people's way. And like having more, kind of basically doing CBT and coming up with more rational responses to whatever kind of obstacle you faced is a really big part of getting people to, again, adhere to the diet for long enough, keep going, even though they gained a pound, to keep going and realize that doesn't negate all the other 10 pounds that they've lost. Keep going and, get back on track, and then they continue losing weight, lo and behold. Okay, number 5 is something that I call mood first, and making sure that you are in a good headspace, right? Because what a lot of people try to do is they feel like absolute shit, like mentally and physically, and then they'll try to just pile on a diet and exercise on top of that shitty mental and physical state. And that is really hard to do. So you have to start shifting your thinking to, what can I do to feel better? And when you feel better, it's easier to stick to the diet. It's easier to, like, when you're sleeping enough, when you're, if you get outside and go for a walk, right? If you get off your screens, if you get an early night's sleep, you're going to feel a lot better the next day. And that's going to make it much easier to do the things you need to do on the diet, and to do the exercise that you need to do, and ultimately stick to the things that are going to get you results. When you feel like shit, you just want to kind of eat and cuddle up and watch TV. So it's about figuring out what's going to make me feel better, what's going to put me in a better mood and a better state of mind, and then it's going to be easier to do the things that I need. And this is such an underrated tool when it comes to fat loss. It's so hard to do to lose fat from a place of just feeling really, really shit. But also, the great thing about this particular technique is that once you start feeling better, then you'll start, sticking to your diet, sticking to your calorie deficit, doing your exercise, and then those things actually make you feel better, right? So then it's like a really positive reinforcement loop, and it gets easier and easier and easier to dig yourself out of that hole. Number 6 is about addressing habits. So both good and bad habits are created. And when I say good and bad, I mean like ones that will either help you reach your goals or not reach your goals. Bad habits are very automated. There's a certain trigger, you have a certain habit, you have a certain behavior or thought pattern, and it becomes very, very automatic, and you don't have to think about it. So it reduces, both good and bad habits reduce decision fatigue. And this is what's so hard initially on a diet, is that you need quite a lot of brain power to identify the bad habits and replace them with good habits. This is one of the hardest bits, but one of the most important things to do is those new good habits is to have certain things that you can employ to make these the most automatic things that you do. So that, I focus a lot on basic habits with my clients, like having a basic meal plan, eating at regular times, having certain go-to meals that they just rinse, repeat. These make fat loss so much easier because it reduces decision fatigue and overwhelm. So you're not thinking 24/7, what should I eat, when should I eat, things like that. All of that becomes automated. And that's a big part of what I do on the program, is helping people create. I don't give people meal plans, but I help people create their own meal plans that work for them in their lives with their preferences and with all the other stuff that they've got going on. Number 7 is biofeedback and body signals. So this is really about hunger and fullness and understanding hunger and fullness. Now, this has become so popular to say because of intuitive eating, that it's all about hunger and fullness. But even though it is important to pay attention to this kind of biofeedback, alone, it is insufficient for fat loss. It goes back to what I said in the beginning, that the body can't register calories eaten. So, if you eat 100 calories or 300 calories of really calorie dense stuff, you'll not be full at all, but 300 calories of very filling foods, you'll be very full. Okay, so you have to have that knowledge and that approach of less calorie dense foods in order to not feel so hungry. Just relying on your body's like hunger and fullness cues, it's not an adequate fat loss strategy. It just will not usually lead to fat loss. If it works for you, fantastic, but for most people it doesn't work. Another important thing is helping people understand what's normal in terms of hunger. But the truth is that you should feel hungry some of the time when you're dieting, and that should be directly before your meal. So if you eat breakfast, lunch, afternoon snack, and dinner, you should be getting comfortably hungry before those meals to the point where your appetite increases and you actually enjoy the food. But you should be no more than a 6 or 7 out of 10 in terms of hunger. You should never be starving hungry. If you're starving hungry, that isn't going to help you lose fat. You don't get extra brownie points for getting more hungry. You just end up losing self-control when you get too hungry. So fueling yourself properly and eating when you're a 7 out of 10 is one of the most important things for fat loss. So not just hunger and fullness, but knowing what to do with those signals and knowing what's normal and what's not normal is also incredibly important. Another one that gets thrown around a lot is eat until you're 80% full. And that also is probably true. A lot of people who are overweight are used to eating to the point where they're really stuffed. And if you're eating that way, you're probably not in a calorie deficit, even if you eat that way for one meal a day, okay? And the other 3 meals, you're just eating until you're 80% full. So there's also a process of learning what hunger and fullness feels like, what's normal, and what you should be feeling on a day-to-day basis. Number 8 is a bunch of other really boring lifestyle factors, like are you getting enough sleep, right? If you're not getting enough sleep, hunger will be higher, you'll crave carbs and sugar more. Are you getting sufficient rest and recovery? Are you getting some screen-free time? Are you getting time with family and friends? Things like that. Stress management. Are you managing stress properly? Are you eating at regular meal times? If you're only getting 4,000 steps a day, it's going to be incredibly hard to lose fat. It's not completely impossible, but it's really, really hard to. Light exposure. Are you ever getting natural light? Because that is also really, really important for feeling good and managing biorhythms and things like that. The last one, number 9, is about resistance training and lifting weights. Now, this is a little bit of a cheeky one because you technically don't need to lift weights in order to lose weight or even fat. But resistance training, lifting weights, is the only way to ensure that lean muscle is preserved or built. And not just lean muscle, like lean tissue, lean body mass, so connective tissue, bone density, things like that. It's the only way to ensure that you are maintaining your lean muscle mass. And if you're not doing resistance training, if you lose weight, about 30% of it will be lean body mass. So not just muscle, but it will be the connective tissue, the bone density, things like that. But 30% of it won't be fat. So that means that if you lose 10 pounds, 7 pounds will be fat and the other 3 pounds will be other lean body tissues, which you don't want to lose. Whereas if you do resistance training, you might lose 10 pounds, but you might actually gain 2 pounds of muscle mass, which means you're actually losing 12 pounds of fat. So not only can you lose 100% of the weight from fat, but you can actually lose even more than 100% of the weight from fat if you're also building muscle. This does wonders for like body composition. This is about increasing mass, lean body mass and muscle mass, and decreasing fat mass. And this does so many things for your health, like regulating blood sugar levels, increasing your energy, decreasing injury rate, increasing mood. And those things all feed back into making it easier to maintain, to stay on the diet, to stay in the calorie deficit, to keep a healthy lifestyle. So it's super important for lots and lots of reasons. And obviously on my online program, I work really closely with my clients. I write them a training program that is specifically for them, for their level, for the equipment they have available. Are they training at home? Are they training in a gym? Do they have any injuries? All of that kind of stuff to make and I follow them week by week, give them feedback on their exercises and tell them where to progress and where to add weight and things like that to make sure that they are actually progressing without getting overly sore, without spending hours exercising, and without injuring themselves. So basically, what you need in order to lose fat is incredibly simple. You just need a calorie deficit, right? You just need to be consuming fewer calories than you are expending. That is very, very, very simple, right? But it's not easy. And the second thing you need in order to be able to lose weight is to adhere to the diet. So to stick to your diet for long enough to get results. It takes time. There's only so much fat that your body can mobilize and use in a given day. So it takes time for this to happen. So in order to get the results, to lose 10, 20, 30 kilos, you need to be doing this for long enough. You need to be in a calorie deficit for a number of weeks and months in order to get the results that you are looking for. So sticking to your diet is key. And then to add to that, if you want to keep the weight off, you need to also it needs to be sustainable. It needs to be something that you can stick to long term. And I have identified 9 different factors that make it easier to stick to your diet and make being in a calorie deficit suck a bit less. And look, I didn't invent this stuff, right? Like I've learned this from courses. I've learned this from working with people. I've learned this from, other professionals. I didn't make all this stuff up. This is all well studied and in science and evidence-based. But as far as I can tell, there are these 9 factors that are really important to address. Almost anyone who's struggling to lose weight is struggling with these parts, these 9 things, or some of these 9 things. And they're usually the things that need to get in place in order to be able to create a calorie deficit and make it, not suck enough to be able to do it for a long period of time. And so with my clients on my online program, what I do is we start with calories. I have a very calories first approach. We start with a calorie target that's based on, first of all, I work out your maintenance calories and we decide what kind of deficit you're going to be in, like a 10, 20, 30% deficit, what makes sense for you. And then from there, we start doing that. We start having awareness about what's in the foods that you're eating and so on and so forth. But then we work our way through this list based on what you most need. So are there mindset things that are getting in the way? Are you catastrophizing? Do you have all or nothing thinking so that you stop getting fuckititis and then screwing your diet up because you think, oh no, I fucked it, so I might as well just throw the baby out with the bathwater and just give up. And then that's what's causing you to not get results. Are you struggling with low mood? Do you have emotional eating issues? Have you got habits set up? Are you making this easier so that it's automatic? So you've got certain meal times, certain meals that you go to. Do you have a meal plan? Do you have a plan? Are you eating filling foods? If you're struggling with hunger in a 20% deficit, it's probably because you're eating way too much calorie dense foods and now you're really, really hungry. So I go through this list, not specifically ticking things off, but whatever is the next thing, the most important thing for each person, what shows up the most for them. Let's address that. Let's get that piece of the puzzle in place. And then once it's in place, we'll move on to the next most important thing. And after a number of weeks and months, you have all those pieces in place. And now fat loss is happening quite consistently. It's quite predictable. You know exactly what to do. You're not hungry. It doesn't mean that then being in a calorie deficit is easy peasy. It is usually still a bit of effort for people. But if you get all these 9 factors in place, then it becomes much easier. So if you need help making this more sustainable for you and making being in a calorie deficit less painful and identifying, most people, they have blind spots and they don't really realize what it is that's tripping them up and what it is that's making it hard for them to do the diet. So that's my job, right? I come in when someone starts on my coaching program, I sort of do an audit of their life and figure out, what areas we need to focus on first. And I kind of drip feed this stuff in. So the most important thing, the thing that's standing out the most is the mindset stuff. Okay, so let's work on that first. Or you're starving hungry, so let's work on eating filling foods first. I help sort of drip feed it in so that it's just one thing at a time and that you can kind of get your head around and figure out and get into a routine with, and then we move on to the next thing. So if you need help doing all these things, if you know what you need to do and you know how to track calories, but for some reason it's just not working, if you're struggling with consistency, if you're struggling with sticking to it, if you're struggling with the adherence to the diet, then shoot me a message. Let me know. We can chat about online coaching and see if it works for you. We can see if it would be a good fit and if I can help you get all these things in place. you can shoot me a message, but I'll also link below a link to book a call with me. We can just have a chat, talk about your goals, see if it's a good fit, or you can fill in the application form that's below, whichever way you prefer to get in touch with me. I'll link those things below. Let me know what you think of this podcast, and let me know which one of these things you think you struggle